It's a conceptual description of a typical power system. Let me try to zoom. Nature has given us a lot of sources of energy: wind power, hydel power are naturally available. They can be used to generate rotary motion using what we call turbines. But the speed obtained using these methods is not very large. We use a term called revolutions per minute for describing the rotary motion, RPM. The typical RPM values that you get using hydel turbines or wind turbines is not more than maybe 100 RPM or 200 RPM or so. If you want higher speeds, another variety of turbines called steam turbines are used. What we do is we heat water using, say, coal or some other way of producing heat. Water gets converted to steam. This is all mechanical engineering, by the way. I don't want to go too far into it, but at least appreciate the bigger picture. The steam being generated by the boiler is tunneled through narrow tubes to make it high energy, to convert it into high energy beams. And those steam beams come and hit a rotary part, which, because of the pressure on it, starts rotating. That is called a steam turbine. Even nuclear power stations essentially do the same. The method of generating heat is nuclear reaction, but after that, it is more or less the steam turbine. Water gets heated, it produces steam, which is fed to the rotary parts, which starts rotating. And turbine means a rotating cylinder, heavy cylinder, which is fed into the AC generator. AC generator has the same shaft going in, which is rotating, and on top of it, there are magnetic poles, north and south poles, which rotate at a certain RPM, which is dictated by the turbine. Those rotating poles, what they do is, out on the outer periphery of the generator, we have static conductors, lot of conductors. Because of Faraday's law, the rotating magnetic flux generated by the poles intersecting with the stationary conductors generates AC voltage across those conductors. This is the crux of the entire power system. Either rotating flux and stationary conductor, or it could be other way around also. There are times when we do the other way around, but for now, stick to what I'm telling you. Rotating magnetic poles, which are being rotated because of the input from the turbine, mechanical input from the turbine, they intersect, or their flux intersects with the stationary conductors, and voltage is produced across the conductors. Lot of conductors are put in parallel, lot of them are put in series to increase the voltage and current ratings. We'll go through all this in detail. And you can have single phase generation, or you can have three generators connected in certain fashions to create three phase systems. We'll be talking about all that in detail later. Anyway, typically it is three phase systems which are used for carrying power because they are a lot more economical. For the same amount of money, you can transfer a lot more power if you use three phase systems. I'll prove it later mathematically. Not mathematically, but I'll give you an idea of how to prove it. So anyway, this is how the AC voltage is generated. The voltage generated is still not high enough. The transmission lines usually are operated at extremely high voltages, 33 kilovolt, 11 kilovolt, or even 440 kilovolt also in some cases I've seen. They are very high tension wires. Tension is the word industry uses for voltage. That is why you every day you hear some accident about somebody dying or some cattle dying because the transmission line fell on them. It's a very high voltage that is going over those lines. So from generator output to get to that high voltage, you need transformers. This is the generation side of the story. Let's say I am describing the thermal power station in Kota right now, from where Jaipur gets all the power, I think. Not all, but most of it. So in Kota, essentially, you have turbine generator set, and not only one, but several in parallel, generating high voltage, and then it is being transformed to even higher voltage using a lot of transformers. And that high voltage is being fed to transmission lines, let's say running from Kota to Jaipur. That is what the schematic is trying to show you. There will be losses, of course. You know transmission line theory already. There will be losses here. But after that also, enough voltage and enough current will be seen on the other side. On the other side, you are getting a very high voltage. You have to step it down. So you will use the transformer in the opposite direction to reduce the voltage to practical values that public wants. Nobody wants 440 kilovolts, right? They want hardly 220 volt or 440 volt most of the time. So you have to step it down using the transformer in the opposite direction. And several transformers again. Then the distribution begins. For that, a large number of smaller transmission lines are used all over the city or all over the plant, even all over LNM IT campus. You see several transmission lines going from here to there to feed various requirements. Substation is the word which is used where you receive the power from the main transmission line and then process it by stepping it down and by distributing it to all required destinations. In fact, when you come back to the institute, you will see that near Jamdoli, there is a substation, right, on one side of the road. It's a small substation that takes care of, I think, Jamdoli as well as LNMIT needs. And this schematic essentially is trying to capture the overall picture of how power is generated, transmitted, and distributed to society. Okay. Now, the next thing, a review of some fundamentals that we may be needing. Just 1 minute. Okay. Get a better one. Most of this is well known to you. Let me quickly go through it fast. This course was meant for mechanical engineering students also in the past. So a lot of things are prepared with them in mind. So be patient. Current, rate of flow of electric charge. I don't have to explain this to you again and again. It's coulombs per second, which is an ampere. Okay, fair enough. Voltage, amount of work required to carry 1 coulomb charge from one point to another. You call it potential difference or voltage. So it's joule per coulomb. That's 1 volt. Power is measured in watts or joules per second. Power, by the way, is a common concept between mechanical engineers and electrical engineers. Mechanical engineers also define power in watts. Electrical engineers or electronics engineers also define power in watts. That is the common meeting point. Most of the power systems are designed, operated, and maintained by mechanical and electrical engineers together. And this is the common meeting ground, the concept of power. As far as we are concerned, in the electrical engineering world, power is simply voltage multiplied by current. In case of AC, it is VRMS into IRMS. For DC, it is simply P into I. And I'm talking about real power, the consumed power. For mechanical engineers, it is more like joule per second, energy per unit time. And these definitions, by the way, are identical mathematically. Whether you say joule per second or whether you say voltage into, volt into ampere, it should be the same. I will show it later. Now, energy is power multiplied by time, assuming that power is same. Otherwise, power integrated with time over a certain time period will give you energy, and it would be measured in joules. Okay. So these are the basic units that you should be keeping in mind. Ampere, volts, watts, and joules, 4 units that power engineers use all the time. Now here is the simple problem that says that you show that the two definitions of power, V into I or joules per second, are equivalent. Well, look at the definitions. Voltage is energy or work per unit charge, and current is charge divided by time. So you multiply the two, you get energy divided by time, which is power. So dimensionally, this is a balanced formula. Whether you say joule per second or volt into ampere, it's the same thing. Okay. Now AC and DC, you know this concept very well. So briefly going through it for the sake of completeness. DC doesn't change with time, AC does. And normally we deal with periodic signals. That means they repeat their values after a certain period of time, which is known as the time period. Okay, fair enough. Both voltage and current can be DC or AC. Even power can be DC and AC. But actually energy can also be DC and AC, but we try to avoid that kind of discussion in this course at least. Okay. AC voltage, you know this all, so let me not waste your time. Yeah, one thing about symbols, be careful. All DC quantities will be given capital letters. All instantaneous quantities in the AC world will be given small letters. But average value or RMS value or peak value, even in AC quantities, will be given capital letters. Ohm's law is well known to you. V equal to Ri. It applies to both DC and AC. In case of AC, it applies to RMS values, it applies to peak values, it applies to even instantaneous values. Okay. R is the resistance, you know it very well. No point me defining it again and again. Now look at a problem which is simple enough, but worth going through. A 10 ohm resistor is connected across a 12 volt battery. That means it's a DC input. How much energy would the resistor consume over a continuous 45-minute period? So you calculate the power dissipated and multiplied by the time. Because power is constant with time, you do a simple multiplication. You don't need to integrate over time. 12 volt divided by 10 ohm gives you 1.2 amperes, and I square R is the formula for power dissipated. So 1.2 into 1.2 into 10. That gives you 14.4 watts, and multiplied by time in second. 45 into 60. That gives you the energy in joules. I have given the answer in kilojoules. Joules is a very small number. So another thing that is commonly used for specifying energy, another unit which is commonly used is kilowatt hour. This is the unit that Jaipur Electricity Board uses to charge us money. When they say unit, they mean kilowatt hour. They don't mean joule. Kilowatt hour means 1 kilowatt power being consumed over 1 hour. Then it's kilowatt hour energy. That's the way you look at the word itself. That's self-explanatory. 1 kilowatt power consumed over 1 hour time gives you 1 kilowatt hour energy, assuming that power is constant over the entire time period. Okay, now they are saying repeat the same problem, but give the answer in kilowatt hour. So what you will do is you will take the power value in kilowatt. It will become 0.0144 kilowatt. And you will take time in hour, which is 45 divided by 60. Multiply the two, you will get the energy in kilowatt hour. 0.0144 multiplied by 0.75. Hopefully there is no mistake in my calculation. So the same problem will have the answer 0.0108 kilowatt hour instead of 38.88 kilojoules. Next problem is conversion formula for converting kilowatt hour into joule and vice versa. You can probably do it directly also based on previous two problems, but let me do it differently. 1 kilowatt hour is 1000 watt into 3600 joules. Joules means watt into second. So I've converted 1 kilowatt into 1000 watts. I've converted 1 hour into 3600 second. Okay. So 1 kilowatt hour turns out to be 36 multiplied by 10 raised to the power 5 joules, which is 3.6 multiplied by 10 to the power 6 joules. And you can do the opposite. 1 joule will become 1 upon 1 divided by 3.6 into 10 to the power 6. You can do the math yourself. 1 joule turns out to be 2.7777, something like that, into 10 to the power minus 11 kilowatt hour. It's a fairly standard formula to convert energy values from kilowatt hour to joule and other way around. If you don't remember it, you can do it intuitively also. Next problem, show that 1 joule energy is approximately equal to 277.78 microwatt hour. This is actually this result in the previous problem stated in a slightly different way. Kilowatt hour has been converted in this problem to microwatt hour. Do the conversion, you should get this answer. Problem 4 is very easy to figure out based on problem 3's answer. Problem 5, little bit more interesting. A 200 volt DC source is feeding a 78 ohm resistor. Calculate the energy consumed in the resistor over a 2-hour period. Try to do it. Spend 2 minutes doing it. 200 volt divided by 78 ohm gives you the current. Then use I square R formula to get the power and multiply that by 2 hour means 3600 into 2, so many seconds. You'll get the answer in joules. Note down this problem, try to do it. $200 divided by 78. How much? This is an example of your geyser, the one that you see in the. Okay, good. Yeah. The geyser that you have in your bathrooms essentially has an ohmic element, or more than one actually in parallel, and they more or less are controlled by Ohm's law. The energy generated or heat generated essentially follows this numerical calculation example. Yes. So here is the solution. Current is 2.5641 amperes approximately. Use I square R, or you can use VI also directly to get the power. Power is 512.82 watt approximately. Now, energy means power multiplied by time. You will actually laugh sometimes in job interviews. These are the kind of questions they ask. They want to see how quickly you can do these calculations, especially if you go for jobs in heavy electrical industry like Bharat Heavy Electricals Limited, or all the electricity boards, or National Thermal Power Corporation, or many companies are there. Government, especially government organizations are there. They are actively looking for engineers who are willing to work in high power industry, and they need both mechanical and electrical engineers. And these are the kind of calculations they have to routinely make. Energy consumption quickly, within seconds you give the answer. So this answer is, I think, possible within 10 seconds. If not 10 seconds, at least within a minute. Energy is P into T. This is the answer in joules, 3692.3 joules. And you have the conversion formula to make the answer in kilowatt hour, or you can use your basic understanding of the definition of kilowatt hour to figure out the answer. Either way, the answer in kilowatt hour is 1.02565. Typically, the companies charge you 8 rupees or so for 1 kilowatt hour. So for this operation, you will be paying around 8 rupees. This is the engineering side of it. A customer going through this operation, of course, we are assuming DC source, companies supply AC, but fine, let's ignore that. Assuming that the charges are 8 rupees per hour, this customer who has done this exercise of putting a 78 ohm resistor across 200 volt source for 2 hours, he will pay around 8 rupees, assuming that 8 rupee per unit is the charge. Okay, that's the practical side of all these calculations. Money. Next one, again, continuation of the same story, but slightly more involved. You see, we are focusing more on power. This course is about power. Voltage and current are required, of course, because without that, you cannot talk about power. But the focus here is power. The society ultimately consumes power. This problem, again, we are assuming DC source for now. A 200 volt DC source is connected to a 78 ohm resistor through a single pole, single throw SPST switch. The word switch has been missed here. Sorry about that. Single pole, single throw switch is what you see all the time. For turning on your fan, what you are using is a single pole, single throw switch. Okay, it has only one position to go to. Either it is off or it is on. It cannot go from one position to another on position. There are single pole double throw switches also, which go from one on position to another on position. Depending on the switch position, a different part of circuit will be connected. But this is a SPST. So if it is on, the current will flow. If it is off, that means open, no current will flow. The values are the same, 200 volt and 78 ohm as in the previous problem. Now what they are saying is, starting at time equal to 0, the switch closes for 1 minute, is open for the next 2 minutes, closes for the next 3 minutes, and becomes open again forever, I suppose. How much energy would the resistor consume over this entire 6-minute period? You have to do the calculations in each step separately. Initially, it is open for 1 minute, so T is 60 seconds. The current, by the way, is the same value as we calculated in the previous problem. Power is also the same, 512.82 watt. But now the energy will be 512.82 multiplied by 60. I'm talking energy in joules right now. Okay. So that would be first part. Power is same as we got in the previous problem, multiplied by time in seconds to get the energy consumed in joules over the first part. And of course, you can convert the answer in kilowatt hour also using the well-known formula. In the second part, it is open for next 2 minutes. So no power will be consumed because there is no current flowing. So no energy will be consumed in the next 2 minutes. For the first minute, we consumed 30.7692 kilojoules approximately. For the second part, for the next 2 minutes, we consumed nothing. Okay. And for the last 3 minutes, yeah, 3 minutes, we repeat the calculation assuming T equal to 180 seconds. So we get the answer 25.641, sorry, 92.3077 kilojoule. Now add up the numbers. E2 is 0, obviously. In the second part, there was no consumption. So the answer, now you are essentially doing integration. It is a piecewise integration that you are doing because power is constant over different intervals of time. In one case, of course, it is 0. So it is an integration, but not continuous. It is piecewise integration that you are trying to do to get the overall energy. And I think my answer is correct, but you can double check the calculations once you get the document. Sure.
Landline number.
Please mute your mic. Okay.
946089
089
3147
31
47. Venetian.
Now let me move forward. Signals means voltage, current, or power, or even energy. And we, as you know very well, classify them into DC or AC, and in case of AC, periodic or non-periodic. Okay, fair enough. These are some basics again, which I will quickly rush through because you know all this. The instantaneous value of voltage is written as Vm cos omega t plus some phase shift theta V. Vm is the peak value, theta V is the phase shift or phase angle, and omega is 2 pi f, which is 2 pi divided by capital T. Capital T is the time period. For 50 hertz signal that we get in our homes, f is 50 hertz, omega will be 2 pi into 50 radians per second, which is around 100 pi radians per second, which is around 314 radians per second. Time period is 1 upon 50 seconds, which is about 20 milliseconds. Okay. Now, obviously, all this is fairly obvious to you. One thing that we will be doing in this course, as we have done in many other courses also, is that for calculating powers, instead of time domain, we will be using phasor domain. And I'll come to that a little bit later, but be aware that we will avoid time domain as much as possible because if you do calculations in time domain for complicated systems, you get differential equations which are very difficult to solve. using phasors, that means frequency domain, you never get differential equations or integral equations. Everything becomes converted to algebraic equations. So allow me to come to that little later, but here I'm going through time domain basics once again. This is how Vm sine omega t will look like, which is Vm sine omega t is obtained by putting theta v equal to minus 90 degrees. As I said, this PPT was, or this presentation was made keeping mechanical engineers in mind. So don't get too bored. Let me quickly finish it. For various values of phase shift, you get signals shown here. I'm sure you can verify this yourself. Periodic signal for current also can be written in a similar manner. We use capital I with a suffix m for peak value and theta I as the phase angle instead of theta v that we were using for voltages. Okay. Peak value is Im and Pm. Phase angles are theta I and theta v. F is 1 upon t. It's all well known to you. Okay, so I think this is fine. Let me now go to power, because power actually matters more. Let's see what we have here. Okay, before that, quickly reminding you of things that you already know. This is the signal, instantaneous signal for any AC voltage, well known to you. Well-known definitions. Let's quickly run through them. You'll get this document. Illustration of how signals behave. What are the various definitions, amplitude, etc., etc. One important thing to notice here, which you may have forgotten, is that average value of such a signal over a full cycle is always 0. You can look at the basic definition of average value, which is written as VDC or VAVG. You can work it out again. The average value of a periodic signal over a full cycle is always 0, because area in the upper half is equal to area in the lower half. So they cancel each other. Average value has no meaning over a full cycle. But RMS value is definitely not 0. You know this very well, I'm sure. Okay, for current also, similar story. You can go through this solved example just in case you are not sure about how to do these things. I think you have done it in several other courses, peak value, RMS value, etc. So let me quickly go through this and get to something which is more interesting. Yeah, if you calculate the average value of a periodic signal over half cycle, then it's not 0. This is something which can be of significance in many cases. Over half a cycle, I define the average value of this given current as shown here. IDC, within brackets, I'm writing 1/2 to show that this is average value over half a cycle. The definition is 2 divided by capital T, integration between 0 and capital T by 2, IT dt. And you can follow the math. This answer is not 0. It is actually 0.6366 Im. Okay. For voltages also, similar results would apply. RMS value, you already know. Even for over a full cycle, it will never be 0. That's the way it is defined. Equation 8 tells you the basic definition. And you know that it is 1 upon square root of 2 of the peak value. I've shown that again here, just in case you are not sure. RMS value of a sinusoidal signal or cosinusoidal signal or any other periodic signal is peak value divided by square root of 2. In all the machinery that you see around you, by default, all the voltage and current ratings given are RMS values. Nobody talks about peak values when it comes to giving you the information. RMS values are understood. You don't have to ask again and again. Now, for various waveforms, these are well-known results. You may not have proven each one of them, but this table is very helpful in many cases. Effective value means RMS value. For sinusoidal signal, you know all these formulas, I'm sure. Okay. Peak value divided by RMS value is the crest factor, and so on. So keep this as a reference for future if necessary. You don't need these formulas except for sinusoidal case. You don't need any other formula in this course, but I still included the table for the sake of completeness for other waveforms also. In many cases, you may end up talking about rectangular pulses also in this course, but by and large, we will avoid that. Power. That is the focus in this course. Purely resistive circuit fed using a single phase AC supply. Single phase means one generator. Give me 1 minute, okay? What will happen? I am talking time domain right now. Ohm's law would apply, right? Small I will be small v divided by capital R. Simple. Suppose V, small v is Vm cos omega t plus theta v. Then, and of course, all these have well-known meanings. It's all written in the document. Then small I will be small v divided by capital R. So if you take small v formula and divide it by R, you will get Vm divided by R as the amplitude, and rest of the thing will be the same. So I define Vm divided by R as Im, and I write It equal to Im cos omega t plus theta I. For the sake of completeness, I am using a different symbol for phase angle of current. Although in this particular case, theta I and theta v happen to be the same. In case of a pure resistance, the phase difference between voltage and current is not there. So theta v and theta I are the same. But in this course, we will be using different symbols for phase shift in current and voltage. Even if they are equal, we still use different symbols. Okay. So theta I is theta v for a purely resistive load. No issue with that. Geyser is one example of this. Now, how do you write power in this case? We write instantaneous power, small p, as instantaneous voltage, small v, multiplied by instantaneous current, small I. And now I plug in the formulas for small v and small I. Here you pay a bit of attention. Small v is given by equation 1. Small I is given by equation 5. And I multiply the two to define the small p value. This is a little, no, it's a little tricky if you are not careful here. So Vm Im cos omega t plus theta v multiplied by cos omega t plus theta I. This is what you get. But it happens in this particular case that theta v and theta I are equal. So what you get is Vm Im cos square omega t plus theta v. Now look at it carefully. I'm sure you have been taught all this in the past, but I'm underlining the fact again, which has a lot of practical significances in real world. This cos square term breaks into 1 plus cos of 2 times omega t plus theta v. That means 2 omega t plus 2 theta v. And of course, half comes out, which I have included in equation 8. So instantaneous power has two components. You can forget the term outside the brackets. It's constant anyway. Within the brackets, you have one term which is independent of time, and second term which is oscillating with time. And that too at a frequency which is double the frequency of the applied voltage, even in case of a purely resistive circuit. The gauger sees all this. We don't notice it move. Gauger actually has time varying power going in. However, let's not make too fine a point of it. Let's say we average this out. Let's take the average of this small p over a full cycle and define that as average power. Public, after all, cares about averaging anyway. They care about how much they have to pay ultimately. They don't care about math that you're doing. Average of this formula on the right hand side of equation 8 over a full cycle, and that result divided by capital T, that means one time period, will give you the average power. Let's do this math. If you integrate the result on the right hand side of equation 8, forgetting the constant term for now, the first term is 1. You integrate it over capital T, you will get capital T. And that divided by capital T will give you 1. So first term integrated will simply give you Vm square divided by 2R. The second term, you can do it yourself. Integrated over 0 to T will give you 0. Cos of 2 omega t plus 2 theta v will have integral of sine of 2 omega t plus 2 theta v divided by something. Take the limits between 0 and capital T, you will get 0. So the interesting point is that although power is instantaneously varying and it has a time varying component and a constant component, over a full cycle, if you average out, the result is independent of time. And that result is Vm square divided by 2R. Now, other thing is Vm and Vrms are related. First of all, let's read this carefully, what I've written here. Equation, I know you may not be able to read it fully, but at least look at the text. Equation shows that the instantaneous power is composed of two components, A, a non-time varying or constant component, and B, a time varying component. The average power, as seen in equation 10, is a constant value, which depends on Vm and R. The average power, which is also known as consumed power, this is the one that generates light, heat, etc. The average power is also known as dissipated power because of that. Is typically denoted by capital P, not small p. This is the power that is responsible for generating the heat in the resistor. That is what you ultimately see doing most of the work in the society. The time dependent component is there. It is actually undesirable to have it, but it is there. We have to be careful about it. Okay. Now, other thing is some mathematical simplification of the result. Vm square divided by 2R is the average power in a pure resistor. We know that Vrms is Vm divided by square root of 2. We have proven it several times. Even in this document, it is proven again. And Irms is Im divided by square root of 2. And Im is Vm divided by R. So bring it all together. The average power turns out to be Vrms into Irms in case of a pure resistor. When you have a gauger which says 220 volt rating, that means RMS value, and suppose it is drawing 10 amperes, by default RMS value. That means power being taken in by that gauger or any heater for that matter is 220 multiplied by 10 watts, which is 2200 watts. Equipment number plates and data sheets, etc. never mention peak value. They talk about RMS values all the time. Be aware of that. Now, purely inductive case, what will happen in such a situation? Single phase circuit again. Let's look at time domain results carefully again. 1 minute. All this has been taught to you in first year, I know. I'm trying to give a different focus here, the practical side of the story. Small v is again Vm cos omega t plus theta v, no issue with that. We know that current flowing through the inductor, instantaneous current, small I, is related to the applied voltage by this formula, V equal to L di by dt. As a result, small I is now 1 upon L integral of V dt by V dt. I'm ignoring the constant of integration. It doesn't change the results. It doesn't change the effect of the results at least. So the current works out to have sine function, not cosine function, which was in the voltage. That means there is a 90-degree phase shift between voltage and current in case of a purely inductive load. Lot of motors are actually quite inductive. So this is a practical situation. Close enough to a lot of practical situations. It's a pain here because we'll see why it's a pain. Anyway, so the current flowing through the pure inductor is given by equation 13. Vm divided by omega L multiplied by sine of omega t plus theta v. Omega L, as you well know, is the reactance of the inductor. We write it XL. So I write IT equal to Vm divided by XL sine of omega t plus theta v. Now I try to fit this into a standard form, IT equal to Im cos omega t plus theta I. That's a standard form for any instantaneous periodic current. So what will be the values of Im and theta I? Obviously Im is Vm upon XL, no issue about that. Theta I, you can check it out yourself, turns out to be theta v minus pi by 2. The applied voltage has a phase shift or phase angle of theta v. You subtract 90 degrees from that to get the phase angle for the current in the load. This is called a lagging load because current is lagging the voltage by 90 degrees. Lot of motors fit this example. Now take the instantaneous power again, do the math. Now interestingly, you see no constant term in the instantaneous power also. It's all oscillating. And of course, at a frequency double the frequency of the input voltage. In this case, there is no term in the instantaneous power which is constant with time. If you take the average of this formula, you get 0. Verify it yourself. Average power is 0 in a purely inductive load. Pure inductor does not consume any power. As simple as that. I'm avoiding the use of a word which will come soon. It's called reactive power and real power. But right now, let's not go too far in that direction. Now, third case, purely capacitive load. Again, small v is given by this standard formula and small I is related to small v by this well-known formula. We write small I based on this differential coefficient. We get minus sign because cosine will differentiate to minus sign. So minus Vm divided by Xc, where Xc is 1 upon omega c, well known to you. The formula for instantaneous current in a purely capacitive load is this. And if you fit it into standard form, you get Im equal to Vm upon Xc, and theta I now turns out to be theta v plus pi by 2. You can go through the derivations carefully later once you get the document. So what happens is, in case of a purely capacitive load, current leads the applied voltage by 90 degrees. While in case of a purely inductive load, the current lags the applied voltage by 90 degrees. In both cases anyway, there is no average value. Average value in this case also, in the case of a capacitive load also, average value turns out to be 0. That remains the same. So the ultimate result that we get is that if you have a purely resistive load, it will consume power, which will generate heat, etc. If you have purely inductive load, no heat will be generated. But lot of oscillating power will be generated, and that may damage the load. That's for sure. We will be coming back to this topic of undesired power. Now suppose a real life situation where you have RLC circuit, which actually represents a lot of equipment's behavior. Most of the real life equipment can be reasonably modeled by using a series or parallel RLC circuit based on experimental data tested in the lab or obtained after testing in the lab. Now, in case of a RLC circuit, what will happen if we use the same theory? I'm continuing with time domain analysis for now. So applied voltage now will be written by this well-known formula. You have done all this in first year. Okay. And you can see that now you have to solve an integral differential equation to get the value of I. Can be done. I'm not saying it's not possible, but after coming to this kind of circuits, we will prefer to do the analysis in a lot more straightforward manner. And that is where we go to the frequency domain. This circuit can be analyzed in time domain. I know you have also done it several times, I'm sure. The point here is that life will be simpler if we can move to frequency domain at this point. That way, integral coefficient and differential coefficient will not come into the picture at all. And this is where the concept of phasor comes in for analyzing power systems in particular. Power systems are typically analyzed in phasor domain, unless you are talking about stability issues, which is very different. Okay. So quickly, before we close for today, let me introduce to you the concept of phasors and how it is beneficial. I think we have done it in the past in many other courses, but it's a good idea to go through it once again. The concept of phasors is used to simplify the mathematical analysis of complicated AC circuits, which means real-life power systems. There are thousands and thousands of components in real-life power systems. You will have 1,000 differential and integral equations to solve if you don't go for phasors. With phasors also, you get thousands of simultaneous equations, but at least they are algebraic. They are not integral differential equations. So you can use matrix theory to solve them. Power systems actually use large number of simultaneous equations in real world, and simulation tools are around to help with the calculations. But in this course, we will avoid simulation tools. We will be sticking to reasonably simple examples. Okay, so the phasors are a straightforward technique compared to time domain technique when it comes to mathematics, especially if the circuits are large and complicated. How do you define phasors? First of all, phasors means a need to use complex numbers. And I think all of you are good in using complex numbers. I don't think I have to worry about that. But still, for the sake of completeness, I have repeated complex number theory in my notes. X plus jy is how in rectangular system we write a complex number where j is square root of -1. Okay, fair enough. In polar system, we write it using magnitude and phase angle as shown here. That's also fair enough. You also know Euler's identity, e to the power j theta equal to cos theta plus j sin theta. I don't have to debate on that issue. Okay. So x plus jy for a given number will be same as magnitude of that number, which is z magnitude, e to the power j theta, which is cos theta plus j sin theta. So if you compare real and imaginary parts on both sides of this equation, you get well-known things. X equal to magnitude of z multiplied by cos theta, y equal to magnitude of z multiplied by sin theta, and the reverse is also possible. You know all these formulas. I don't have to waste your time. They are here for the sake of reference. In case you get lost, at least you know where to look for correct formulas. If you have to convert a complex number from polar to rectangular system or other way around, these are the formulas you need to use. Okay. In fact, calculators nowadays allow conversion without using these formulas, but I'm not very comfortable with that. I do it using these formulas. And in this course, you will be doing conversion of complex numbers from polar to rectangular and rectangular to polar a lot. That's why I needed to put these equations once again for your reference. Okay, well-known things for complex numbers. I don't think I want to waste too much of your time. Some numerical examples of how to convert a complex number from Cartesian to polar and other way around. Go through it carefully once you get the document. What I am trying to get at is how to define phasors, which is not in this document, unfortunately. So give me 1 minute. Yeah. You know this standard representation of an AC voltage, instantaneous value of an AC voltage. Okay. Well-known things, omega equal to so much, etc., etc. We also know Euler's identity, e to the power jx equal to cos x plus j sin x. Suppose I put x equal to omega t plus theta v. Then I get cos x. Cos x is real part of e to the power jx, right? And if I use x equal to omega t plus theta v, I get cos of omega t plus theta v equal to real part of e to the power j omega t plus theta v. So I take this value of cos omega t plus theta v and I put it in the original equation for small v. This is how phasors are arrived at. So small v is now real part of Vm multiplied by e to the power j theta v e to the power j omega t. This is still time domain. The corresponding phasor is written by dropping Re and dropping e to the power j omega t. The remaining term on the right hand side of equation 7 is the phasor of small v. That means Vm e to the power j theta v is the phasor for small v given by equation 1. Take the amplitude and take the phase angle and put e to the power j theta v. This is how phasors are defined for time period, for time varying signal, for time varying periodic signals. Okay. You know, it's getting too long for you, I'm sure about it. But anyway, the point is that phasors are straightforward once you have the time domain equation with you. And a similar story applies to current also. Give me 5 more minutes, that's it. Okay. If you had a current, instantaneous current formula, you simply take the peak value and take the phase angle and write them in a similar form as we did for the voltage to get the phasor for the current. In many books nowadays, instead of peak value, they use RMS value for defining phasors. Nothing wrong with that, just that you got to be aware of what you're doing. I would prefer that in this course we stick to peak values for defining phasors. However, there will be some books where there will always be some difference compared to your result by a factor of 2 or square root of 2, because they are using RMS definition of phasors rather than peak definition. As far as I am concerned, I'll mention to you that I am using peak values throughout for defining phasors of voltage and current. Anyway, I've written this here though. In many books nowadays, the phasor for AC voltage is written as Vrms e to the power j theta v. However, we will stick to the definition in equation 8 or equation 9, which means peak value rather than RMS value. Current also, same story. If you are given a current small I equal to Im cos omega t plus theta I, the phasor is Im e to the power j theta I. Simple. Okay. Again, books may use RMS value, but we will stick to peak values. There's a lot of solved examples here for calculating phasors of given instantaneous currents and voltages. I don't think I want to go too far. More important than all this is how to apply phasors for solving single phase and three phase power system problems. And I'm trying to give you basics today. Most of these documents have things that you are supposed to know. So please don't mind me going through them once again. There's a lot of solved problems here. Maybe I'll do them next time because it's a long document.